MovieMuse Episode 3, End of Year Party. MovieMuse.net is the home of movies, music and random musings from the MovieMuse team. Since the last show, the site's been updated with our regular Freeview Movies of the Week feature, where our resident TV planner Matt Corn lists the best films on free-to-view services for the coming week. We also have movie reviews of Pixar's latest life lesson in The Good Dinosaur, the franchise Awakens with our in-depth review of Star Wars Episode 7, more of which later in the show, an evaluation of Daniel Craig's tenure as 007 in our James Bond box set review, and Leonardo DiCaprio taking on the worst of nature and man in the epic historical adventure The Revenant. Here in the MovieMuse multiplex we have a full complement. So I'm your projectionist, Gordon Sinclair. In the box office we've got Matt Corn.
Hello there.
Manning the confectionery stand, it's Graham Mason.
Hello there.
Wearing a fetching uniform and ushering you to your seats, it's Pete Foyer-Forson.
Hi.
And ready with your interval ice creams, it's Simon Burton.
Hello. As
this is our first show after Christmas, I thought we'd just quickly run round and see if anybody's got any movie-related Christmas presents. Graham?
No. In a word, I didn't get any movie-related. It was all video games, and that was about it, I'm afraid. I did buy a couple of movies for my girlfriend, but unfortunately I didn't receive any movie-related gifts.
Fair enough.
Sorry.
Peter?
I got a coat.
Was it a Kylo Ren coat?
No, it's like some Swedish thing.
Nothing to do with movies then?
Nothing at all.
So your answer's no?
Correct.
Matt, surely you got something movie-related for Christmas?
Yes, Gordon, I did.
Brilliant.
All is not lost. I got Big Hero 6 on DVD. I got documentary, which I can't remember the name of right now. It's Crystal Lake Memories, I think, which is a 3 DVD documentary about the making of the Friday the 13th films. And most importantly, from my wife, I got 2 tickets to go and see John Carpenter perform his music at an event in Manchester. He's going to be performing all his music from his films, Halloween, Escape from New York and such like, which I'm really looking forward to because I'm a big fan of his.
Very cool.
Excellent. Simon, anything from you?
No, not really.
Frauke got something film related, if that counts.
Absolutely, Pete.
The Hollow Crown box set, which is 3 films based on Shakespeare plays, Henry IV, V and Richard II. We've watched the first 10 minutes of one of them so far, and they could be speaking French.
Did you get anything, Gordon?
Yes, I did, thanks, Matt. I got the Radio Times Guide to Film 2016. It's a 1,500-page book of 24,000 reviews of films going back to the start of film, I assume. They've all got ratings, the main actors who are in them, the directors and all stuff like that, and biographies or filmographies even of directors and major actors. So it's now my new film Bible, so we may use this as the show goes on.
So, as always on MovieMuse, we'll begin by asking the crew what we've been watching recently. So we'll start with Simon. Any chance you haven't been watching Father Ted this time?
No, Matthew. Funny enough, I haven't watched any Father Ted. So I did watch a couple of films. I watched The Nightmare Before Christmas on Christmas Eve. And then that was followed by Casino Royale, which was the first time I've ever seen it. And quite enjoyed that bit of bondage.
Give it 4 stars. I liked it. I thought it was a good start to the new Bond franchise.
By the cut of your suit, you went to Oxford or wherever. Naturally think human beings dress like that. But you wear it with such disdain. My guess is you didn't come from money. And your school friends never let you forget it.
Okay, Graham?
I watched 3 films recently. I watched Ant-Man, which is obviously a superhero movie. Bit of a different superhero movie, really. It's a bit slow to start off with. I think Gordon made that comment when he watched it a bit. I didn't mind that too much because Paul Rudd is an excellent actor, comic actor, and there was a lot of amusing touches in it, and I thought it was really cool the way they set it up and everything. The story wasn't anything great, I'm afraid. It's based on a comic strip, so it's never going to be amazing, but they actually managed to make the character quite cool in the end, which was a bit of a result considering the premise, I think.
Hey, are we the good guys?
Yeah.
We're the good guys, right?
Yeah, we're the good guys.
Feels kind of weird, you know?
I also finally got around to watching Iron Man 3 on Christmas Eve, which was not as good as the first one, probably on a par with the second one, maybe a little bit better. It all does kind of fall apart a bit at the end and you don't know who's who or what is what, and it's just a big fight, basically. There's a couple of plot points which I didn't really think were too credible, but it had more Gwyneth Paltrow in it, and I quite like her, so that was okay with me.
Lesson number 1. Heroes. There is no such thing.
And I also watched, you'll like this one, Matt, Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back, which I believe is your favourite Star Wars film.
correct?
I watched it with my sons because I thought maybe my comments in the last episode were a bit harsh. We watched the bit at the beginning on Hoff, and we were like riveted. It was Sunday afternoon, and we loved that. And after Hoff had finished, we kind of turned it off after about 10 minutes because we all got bored and thought it was rubbish.
Scandalous. It's disgusting. What exactly is the problem with The Empire Strikes Back? It was alluded to last time around, but...
Well, first of all, I don't dislike it. It's obviously a good film. But I just feel that after Star Wars, which is non-stop action, I just find Empire Strikes Back a bit jointed. You've got a brilliant action scene at the beginning, no argument about that whatsoever, and I think it's amazing, and I've watched it hundreds of times, that bit on the Hoff. I think it's brilliant. But then I think just when Luke goes off and does his Jedi training, and the whole thing with Yoda, who's basically a Muppet, let's be honest, is just a bit juvenile in places, and all the time Han Solo and the others, they're dodging asteroids and basically running away from the Empire. I just find it all a bit boring. It has got the nice set piece at the end where Luke fights against Darth Vader. It just doesn't trigger the same nostalgic emotion that the other films do.
Hang on! Hang on, Dak! Get ready to fire that tow cable!
Well, you're wrong, obviously, but I actually watched episode 2 last week, and after really slagging it off, all of us, I found it's not as terrible as I remembered it to be. It's still terrible, don't get me wrong, but it's actually, the story's not too bad. It's really the acting, the underacting by some and the overacting by others that spoil, and some really badly directed and really badly thought through scenes, but it's nowhere near as bad as I thought it was going to be. Still bad though.
Oh, not good.
So, Gordon, you said you were watching episode 2 of Star Wars. What else have you been watching?
Yeah, that's not actually one of the films that I wanted to talk about. I watched The French Connection.
Alright, Popeye's here. Get your hands on your heads. Get off the bar and get on the wall.
1971 police drama based on the real life stories of Eddie Egan and Sonny Grosso, apparently. And it was also the first R-rated film to win the Best Picture Oscar, according to my brand new film Bible. Having not seen it in the 44 years since it was released, I don't think it's aged particularly well. And I think if I'd have watched it 20 years ago, I might have actually thought it was a pretty good film. But to be honest, I was quite disappointed with it because it is seen as one of the all-time great cop films, and it didn't really work for me. The story was all right, the acting was all right, but that's pretty much all it was, just all right, except for a car chase where they're going down the road under the raised rail tracks in New York, and he's driving through them at high speed, and it's just like playing Grand Theft Auto or one of those games that put you in that situation, and it's really, really well shot car chase scene, so that definitely elevated it for me. But there's a couple of continuity issues in there that really, really annoyed me, and I don't know why it annoyed me, probably because a film with such blatant issues won an Oscar for Best Picture, which actually I think is quite diabolical. One where Popeye Doyle, Gene Hackman's character, is running down the street chasing a crib, for no good reason takes his coat off while he's running, and then in the next scene he's got his coat back on again. But the worst bit is one of them, I think it's Roy Scheider's character, and he's on the top of a roof looking down. He must be 10 stories up, and he sees a criminal running. So he goes down 10 flights of stairs and still catches up with the criminal. So issues like that for a really well-loved film, it kind of bothered me. So I would give The French Connection 3 out of 5, I reckon. It's nowhere near as good as other films of the day, like Serpico and stuff like that, in my opinion.
Put your hands in the air!
The second film that I watched was The Last Stand, Arnold Schwarzenegger film. Apparently, this one was his first lead role for 10 years after Terminator 3, again, according to my Film Bible. Arnie is a small-town sheriff in Summerton, Arizona, and apparently this town is the closest point to Mexico if you go across the canyon, or some silly story like that. And some big drugs criminal has broken out of prison, stolen a fast sports car, and is going to drive over a makeshift bridge to escape into Mexico, and only Arnie can stop him. It's basically a typical Arnie film. Lots of action, lots of Arnie's one-liners. Nothing really to hate about it, but I don't know. I think he's a bit old for that kind of film now, and I just didn't believe him as a small-town sheriff.
I actually really enjoyed that film because it kind of makes fun of the fact that Arnie's a bit too old for it now, and I thought that worked quite well. I've only seen it once and it was quite a while ago, so I may have misjudged it slightly.
Well, I think maybe I missed the jokes about him being that old. I think I just took it that, this Austrian pensioner is sheriff of small town Arizona. It just seemed a bit odd. But, like I say, nothing to hate about the film. It was actually entertaining. I enjoyed it. My girlfriend loved it. So I'd give it 2 out of 5, but it's a good 2 out of 5.
Wow, you're looking jacked. You've been working out?
And the final film was Escape Plan. Again, Arnie's in it, but this time it's a Stallone film, and you should already know that I'm a massive Stallone fan. And 50 Cent is in it as well, apparently, but I can't remember which character he played, to be honest, so he wasn't that memorable. So basically, Stallone is the world's #1 professional prison breaker, and to test out this secret prison that nobody's allowed to know the location of, he goes in and he's going to get this massive payday for going in and trying to break out. But then it all goes wrong and he's trapped in this prison. Actually, he's properly imprisoned, so he ends up having to escape for real. Where this film goes wrong is he doesn't seem to care that these are supposed to be the worst criminals in the world. These are people who can't be tried. They're put in this prison because they can't go through the justice system. They're that bad. But he's quite happy to team up with them to escape and doesn't really go into why they're in there in the first place. So, his morals can't be that good, to be honest. But the film itself is really good. If you can get over that little hurdle, the film's really good. And Stallone out actions, out acts, out comedies, and out everything Schwarzenegger in the film. So I love that one up to Sylvester Stallone. But it's just really good at entertaining. It's got a decent story apart from that one stumble. 2 action heroes not trying to be young men, but not acting their age either. So really enjoyed that one. So I'll give that 3.5 out of 5.
Race gone off the grid.
Okay, moving on then. Pete, what have you been watching?
Well, over Christmas, I watched a whole load of Christmas films, like the traditional films that come on telly over Christmas. So I watched a bit of Chevy Chase in National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, which is always fun.
There's nothing like the warmth of the holidays.
Can I take something out for you?
And this season, it'll be a perfect Christmas.
Merry Christmas!
Thanks to Chevy Chase.
That thing had 9 lives. She just spent them all.
National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, rated PG-13.
It's probably the worst National Lampoon's film, but it's still a laugh. Maybe 2.5 stars out of 5. It's got Chevy Chase in it, so maybe I'll upgrade it to 3. The Great Outdoors.
They are men of great courage. Men of great daring. They're the men of the great outdoors. Dan Aykroyd and John Candy. The Great Outdoors. Outdoor fun for everyone.
That had to hurt.
Rated PG.
That always seems to be on at Christmas time. That and Trading Places. And yeah, that's always fun. That's always nice. Bit of Dan Aykroyd. Quite good fun. What did happen to Dan Aykroyd? Dan Aykroyd hasn't existed in ages.
He got fat.
He did get very fat.
He was always pretty chubby, though, wasn't he?
It was about the time of the late 80s. He was in Driving Miss Daisy. I remember seeing him in that, which I think won an Oscar, didn't it? And I thought, Dan, what have happened to you, man?
It's fair to say, in recent years, he's got fat and less funny, as have a lot of comedians, I think.
He was never out and out hilarious. He was more just like the sort of second in charge, the kind of person that everyone else kind of bounced their ideas off of. I kind of felt like in The Great Outdoors that I watched. Obviously it's a John Candy film. He's kind of running the show. And Dan Aykroyd is there as a kind of an opposite to that, a sort of counteract. It worked quite well. Again, it's not going to knock your socks off, but maybe 3.5, 4 if you're being really generous.
Wow, that is generous, I think. I'm a fan of The Great Outdoors. In fact, I own it. I've just seen it on my shelf. But it's one of those comedies, one of those spend the summer on the lake type comedies that were very popular in the 80s, isn't it?
Yeah, see, another film that's always on at this time of year, and I didn't see it this time, but it probably was on, was Uncle Buck.
They're 3 troubled children, and he's the trouble.
Where have you been all your life? In a closet?
John Candy is Uncle Buck, from John Hughes, rated PG.
I always preferred Uncle Buck to The Great Outdoors. I'd give Uncle Buck a good 5 stars, but I haven't seen it, so I shouldn't really talk about it.
Well, I've watched loads of films over Christmas. In the last 2 weeks, I've probably watched like 15 films or something daft like that. So these were some of the ones I watched. I watched Looper.
Time travel has not yet been invented.
Which I was interested in because it's directed by Rian Johnson, who is the guy that writes and directs the next episode of the Star Wars saga, Episode 8. So I was interested to see what his work's like, and the best way I can describe it, it's about time travel basically, and it stars Bruce Willis and Joseph Gordon-Levitt as the same character from different times. It's very dark indeed. It's got a particular scene where a guy's come back from the future and his present time counterpart is having bits of his body removed, and the guy's body parts are removing in front of his very eyes. The future guy's body parts, his fingers suddenly vanish and so on. So yeah, it was good. It's dark, and if the next episode of the Star Wars saga is written by this guy in a similar way, then it's going to be pretty dark. 3.5 stars for that. I also had a present from my wife Anna, which was Maggie, film from this year starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. Again, Arnie's getting a lot of time here. It's a bit of a different take on the zombie genre. Arnie's a farmer whose daughter's been bitten by a zombie, and rather than she dies and gets turned into a zombie immediately, it's more like a sort of terminal disease where they gradually get worse and take on the sort of attributes of a zombie and eventually get a thirst for human flesh. So he's basically looking after her until she turns into a zombie. The zombie girl, his daughter, is played by Abigail Breslin, who was the little girl in Little Miss Sunshine, and she's grown up to be not a bad actress and quite attractive as well, which seems weird to say given the character in Little Miss Sunshine. It's probably Arnie's best film since returning to acting full time, closely followed by The Last Stand in my opinion, but it's not particularly enjoyable to watch. It's quite grim, as you'd imagine by watching someone gradually dying. It's not particularly pleasant, but it was an interesting film, so that's 3.5 stars for that one as well. And finally, a present that I bought Anna was, she's a big fan of Sylvester Stallone, just like you, Gordon, and also she's a big fan of country music. And it turns out there's a film that combines these two loves. It's a film called Rhinestone, and it was made in the 80s, actually after Stallone was famous for being Rocky and Rambo. And he's a New York taxi driver that's picked to become a country singer by Dolly Parton. And they go off to Dolly Parton's home in Tennessee or wherever, and he gradually learns to become a country boy and so on. And it's pretty awful. It's kind of enjoyable and funny as an odd couple comedy, but Stallone's singing, particularly in the end sequence, is absolutely diabolical. So yeah, it was an experience to say the least. So 2 out of 5 stars for that one.
Sylvester Stallone, Dolly Parton, in a knockout comedy of the summer, Rhinestone, coming soon.
There is one film that we've all been watching which we haven't mentioned, which is Star Wars The Force Awakens. We all went to see it before or just after Christmas, and the majority of us have put a review on the MovieMuse website of the film, so we're not going to go into too much detail about it, but we feel we must mention what our thoughts about the film were. Now, I should probably warn you that there might be some spoilers during this next section, so if you haven't seen the film yet, you might want to skip forward a few minutes. So I'll kick this off with a little mini review. First, I want to mention how nervous I was about watching this film. Certainly the few days leading up to the release, I was really nervous about finding out whether the film was even any good, let alone any spoilers about the content of the film. My expectations before watching it, I was just hopeful that it would be a good film that recaptured the excitement of the originals, didn't rely too much on the older characters, had decent acting and had the feel of a classic Star Wars movie, and I think it satisfied all those requirements. It was great and well acted new characters, spectacular action sequences, a nice lived-in, dirty, realistic universe. There was plenty of nostalgia and familiarity, which some people have levelled a criticism about it for, but I felt it still had freshness from the new faces. I'm ranking it joint third best with Return of the Jedi. I don't think it would be the film it is without the original saga, so you can't really rate it higher than any of the originals, but I'm looking forward to hopefully more risks being taken with the story in episodes 8 and 9. So a great start to the new chapter in the saga, and 4 out of 5 stars from me. So, same from each of you. Let's go to Graham first.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with that, Matt. I'd also give it 4 out of 5. The only thing that really disappointed me was that it was very familiar, I thought, to A New Hope. A bit too much so, in my opinion, especially the last 30 minutes or so of it. But otherwise, yeah, I had a thoroughly entertaining 2 hours in the cinema. I thought it was a pretty good entry in the Star Wars canon.
Pete?
Yeah, it was alright. I suppose I enjoyed it while I was watching it. It kind of, as you said, it ticked all the right boxes. It had the right feel, it had the right look. It wasn't just like loads of rubbish CGI. It was nicely put together, much like the new Star Trek films that he's equally made in the same way. But I have to say, at the end, I kind of felt a bit disappointed. They didn't really have any ideas. It was kind of like as if the other films hadn't even existed. It was like, what are the big bad guys going to do now? Well, they're going to build another Death Star, the third one. And then, just to top it off, they had like another trench run. And I was like, this is ridiculous. It's the exact same film. So, yes, it was good. Yes, it was fun. And I think if you were a kid, you would absolutely love it. And maybe that's kind of the problem because, you know, we've got too much history. We know too much about the series. But I would have preferred it if they'd just made a completely different story. Just something completely new. Kind of just left me with a bit of a sour feeling. Having said all that, it's still the fourth best film in the series.
And a rating?
3 stars.
Fair enough. Gordon, please give us some positivity after that.
Yeah, that was quite a negative view to say that it was a film that was actually quite good. I've seen the film 3 times now, and I've got to say the first time I watched it was with trepidation. Have they ruined it? Is it going to be silly popcorn and not Star Wars canon and all of that stuff? The second time I watched it, I was sat there trying to find all the hidden things and, watching it like a geek. But the third time, I just sat, watched it, and enjoyed it, and just took it all in as a really good science fiction film, and that's what it is. I love all the nods to the fans. For me, Chewie was the best thing in the film. I thought it's about time they gave him a role that actually meets his stature. So it was great to see Chewie, and I'm pretty sure he'll be back for the next film as well. Yeah, it copies the old films. I'm not sure you can say there's a trench run, but yeah, it copies the old films in a way, but is that a bad thing? Do we think that in that universe they wouldn't have built the Starkiller? I think that's actually a logical step forward for them. There are some silly bits in it, like where they fly to the Starkiller, but luckily land right where everybody is. They could have ended up in Clacton when Kylo Ren and everything were in Las Vegas, but they didn't. They landed a couple of 100 yards away. I've got nothing bad to say about the film. It's a 4-star film for me. It's the 3rd best Star Wars film. Really pleased and really looking forward to the future.
Thank you. Simon, your thoughts?
It was an enjoyable romp. It was Star Wars. It felt like Star Wars. It looked like Star Wars. It had all the ingredients of a Star Wars movie. I enjoyed it while I was watching it. Afterwards, thinking about it, I just thought it's just a rerun of A New Hope. They could have come up with better than that, even to reboot the franchise, as far as I'm concerned. It was like some of the comedy between the old stars were forced into it, and I didn't enjoy all of that either. Too contrived for my liking. It was nice to see the characters back, and it did tie up a few ends, but I just overall just disappointed, I'm afraid. It was okay.
So what's your rating?
I'll give it 3.
Differing opinions slightly there, more differing than I was expecting in fact, but we're just going to quickly go through a few categories to say who's your favourite new character, worst new character, best scene, and any question you have after watching the film. So I'll go first just to get things rolling. Best new character is Finn. Worst new character was Captain Phasma. Complete waste of time in that film. My favourite scene was Han being reunited with the Millennium Falcon, which was a proper tears of joy moment. And my question is, how much did Mark Hamill get paid for his 30-second appearance in The Force Awakens? So let's go to Simon.
Right, my favourite new character, like you, is Finn. Liked his character, like the way he sort of thrust into it, even though he didn't seem to want to be in it. Unfortunately, again, like you, I think Captain Phasma is my worst character. Again, a total utter waste of time. My favourite scene was that bit with the lightsaber, and it flew to her and not to Kylo Ren. And my question is where do they go from here? Can they take more risks? Can they just make the story very different from any of the other films? And can they actually give it the conclusion at the end that it befits the whole saga? Hopefully, they can.
Okay, Pete?
My favourite new character, I'll go with Rey, just because, she was kind of cute. I'll go as my least favourite character. I can't remember the guy's name, but the ginger guy from Harry Potter. Just because there was a lot of English actors in the film, I found, and he was just the ginger guy from Harry Potter.
General Hux is the one he's talking about.
Ah, right, yeah. I wasn't a fan of General Hux either.
My favourite scene, I did quite like the X-Wings and the TIE fighters actually fighting against each other above the planet, so not out in space, because you didn't really get that in the other film. I just thought that was a nice touch. And my question would be, why did Leia hug Rey at the end because they've never actually met each other. They don't know each other.
Or do they? Good question. Very good question. Gordon?
Okay, well, my favourite character, like Pete, was Ray. Daisy Ridley was absolutely fantastic in it. She played it as a girl who was tough but didn't know anything in the world, who was learning her way as she went, and she was just a kick-ass, good-looking young lady. I thought she was brilliant. Worst character, same as everybody else, Captain Phasma. I actually thought the actress who played her really badly, so it wasn't just that the character was wasted, it was really overacted walking and moving, and terrible delivery of lines. We saw nothing of her. She was a wasted character. I'm absolutely certain she'll be back with a bigger role in future films, but what a waste. My favourite scene, again, pretty similar to Pete's, it was when the ships were flying over Jakku rather than in deep space, but specifically the first scenes with the Millennium Falcon, where it's escaping and then it's flying over that Imperial graveyard, and then it flies into the Star Destroyer, and you've got the dead AT-AT at the side, and that was just an absolutely stunning scene. And for me, that's the highlight of easily the last 5 Star Wars films. And my question would be, Maz Kanata, when you're going to get an actress like Lupita Nyong'o, who is one of the most beautiful women in the world, why on earth would you make her a completely CGI'd 3-foot-old lady? I just didn't get it. So why is my question.
Cool. Graham?
My favourite character, I know you guys don't really like him, but it was Poe Dameron. I just thought it was really cool. My worst character again was Captain Phasma, because I was expecting... I think she appeared in the trailer, didn't she? And it looked really mean and a good character, and then it just never really happened for the character, and it sort of like gave in to the good guys a bit and was just a bit flat. My favourite scene is when, a bit predictable, it's when Han and Chewie appear for the first time. I thought that was a really cool scene. My question is, can they avoid remaking The Empire Strikes Back now?
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Let's now move on to our next section.
Okay, next up is a chance for one of the team to tell us what they're looking forward to in the near future. So Pete, you've got the baton this time, so what trailer have you picked for us?
I've not actually picked a film that I'm looking forward to per se, but I'm curious. I'm very curious because what I've picked is the Warcraft trailer, the film Warcraft, based on the computer game series. And I have to say, it looks weird. The animation is weird. Basically, I think what most people would recognise as Warcraft is World of Warcraft, which obviously has an array of different races, dwarves and whatnot, as well as the orcs and the humans. Whereas obviously the original Warcraft game, back from the early 90s, was just orcs versus humans. And it seems, correct me if I'm wrong, in the trailer to just be orcs and humans. And I felt that was a bit of a misstep. It didn't really represent to me what Warcraft has now become.
Okay, well, let's watch the trailer now, and we'll come back in a moment with our thoughts.
For years, our world has been at peace. But something is coming. I can feel it. Dark forces are upon us.
Find these beasts, or whatever they are.
Our world is dying. There is nothing to go back to. If our people are to survive, we must make a home here. Whatever happens.
Whatever happens. If we do not unite, our world will perish.
This doesn't need to happen. There is one who may help us.
For orcs, there is no other life but war. No, but with the humans' help, there could be.
Why are you here?
To save our people.
Can we trust him?
They're beasts. They should all be destroyed.
Are you sure about that? We'll protect the kingdom. You and I.
You'd side with the humans against your own kind.
This is suicide.
We have no choice. We should attack with full force.
Whatever you plan to do it now!
Okay, let's see what everybody thought of it. So Simon, what did you think?
Yeah, it was interesting. It's going to have comparisons to Lord of the Rings, obviously. It's the same sort of scenario. I've never played Warcraft, not a game that's really interested me. But as from maybe, like a sort of Lord of the Rings wannabe, it might be worth looking at. Not something I would say I'm definitely looking forward to. It's like Pete, I'm just curious to see what it would be like. It'll have to avoid the Lord of the Rings comparisons, which it won't, and it will probably fall down against that. But yeah, doesn't look too bad.
Okay, great. Matt, what about you?
Well, I think this trailer is literally hitting all the fantasy film notes it can possibly do so. I noticed right at the beginning it's got some snow-capped mountains and white cities, just like Lord of the Rings. In fact, the opening couple of seconds could easily be the opening couple of seconds from the Two Towers. Then I noticed there's like a big green explosion at one point in it, which was just like the big red explosion in the last Star Wars trailer. There's also some kind of flying creature that's very similar to a hippogriff from Harry Potter. And also it seemed to have baby Shrek in it that was then put in a basket like Moses. So yeah, there's a bit of everything in there. I did notice, just like Pete did, that it seems to be more to do with the original Warcraft than World of Warcraft. Not that I'm particularly familiar with either. But yeah, it actually looks quite good from the trailer, which usually means it's going to be terrible.
Okay, Graham, what about you?
Well, yeah, just agree with you guys. I've just got a real bad feeling about it, to be honest. I mean, Warcraft, it's not a particularly story-driven game, is it? If it is based on the original game. World of Warcraft I've never played, but like Pete says, it doesn't really look as if it's based on that because there's lots of different races. So the animation looks fine, but I've just got a really bad feeling about it. I desperately want one of these video game adaptations to be good, so that people throw money at them so they're done properly, because at the moment all we get is low budget films like the Resident Evil films, which seem to get worse as they go on. And really we need, I think, a high budget, good video game adaptation so that more can get made. But unfortunately I don't think this is going to be it.
There are a few coming out this year as well, aren't there? So there is the potential.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of money's been thrown at this one, but I don't think it'll have been thrown at something that's ultimately going to be good.
There have been a couple of recent ones that weren't too bad. Prince of Persia, that was okay.
Flopped badly though, didn't it?
Yeah, unfortunately it did. The ones that are coming out do look good. Assassin's Creed certainly looks like they've put some money into it with Michael Fassbender. So, you might just get your wish with these big franchises now making the movies. But on the Warcraft front, I know nothing about any of the games, but I quite enjoyed the trailer. Yeah, it's touching on everything that every other fantasy film has done. Nothing original in it, but seemed to do it well. I'm not sure what Pete was talking about with the animation looking odd. The animation looked like just your everyday CGI to me. When I looked at the trailer, the next video on after the trailer on YouTube was a 20-minute breakdown of the trailer by a couple of guys from IGN, and they were talking through every little step of the video, all of the lore and the canon of Warcraft, and every little bit means something and is out of Warcraft. And they were absolutely drooling over some of the things that they've put in there and how great it looked for Warcraft fans. So we might be being a little bit harsh saying that it's just Lord of the Rings with a bit of Harry Potter and a bit of this and a bit of that thrown in. Fans of the games may actually get more out of it than we will, but I thought it looked quite good. I'll probably go out and see it when it comes out.
I think what I meant when I said the animation was not what I expected is that it's Blizzard and they make some of the most amazing CGI trailers for their games. And okay, I know they're only talking like things that are like 3-4 minutes long, and this is an entire film, but it just didn't seem to have the same quality to me. It seemed like a sort of Jar Jar Binks moment where you had like obvious cartoony animation and then real people. It seems to have a style, like a cartoony style, much like the Warcraft style, but that doesn't then work if you have real live human actors.
Okay, we'll wait until the film comes out and no doubt give it a review around that time.
Next up is one of our rotating features, and this episode we're going to do a game of 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. If you don't understand the rules, it's pretty simple. The idea is one of our panel will come up with the name of an actor, and we've got to link that actor to Kevin Bacon in as few moves as possible, a move being a film linking one person to another until we ultimately get to Kevin Bacon. So just to go over the rules in case you want to play along while you're listening to this. Our panellist, which is going to be Graham on this occasion, will choose somebody for us to link to Kevin Bacon. He will already have a solution which he'll keep to himself. You can only link to Kevin Bacon through films, no TV shows, and through actors, no crew members. Later in the show we'll give the solution, and we've got a point system which we'll explain later on. So, Graham, who have you chosen for us to link to Kevin Bacon?
I've chosen someone from a different era, but they've obviously both been in a lot of films, so hopefully you guys will be able to work it out fairly easily. You have got to link John Wayne to Kevin Bacon. Should I tell you how many moves I've done it in?
Yeah, I think that'd be interesting to know.
I've done it in 3 moves.
Wow.
So 3 links. So I've linked John Wayne to an actor, who I've linked to another actor, who is then linked to Kevin Bacon.
Impressive. Most impressive.
Thank you.
So next up is Film Club. Last time, Pete, it was your choice of a film for us all to watch, so we all went away and put ourselves through The Secret of Kells. Do you want to tell us why you chose it and what your thoughts were of the film?
You say put ourselves through it. Does that imply that you didn't enjoy it?
We'll come to my opinion of it shortly, but let's find out what you thought.
I thought it was a magical, charming masterpiece of a film, with beautiful animation, lovely dialogue, enchanting music, and a style all of its own. And only a cold-hearted, sour, miserable old sod could possibly dislike this film.
Are we going to get an overview of what it's about? Because having watched it, I'd love to know.
According to the Radio Times Guide to Films, The Secret of Kells, director Tom Moore's Oscar-nominated Dark Ages saga tells the story of Brendan, a 12-year-old novice monk who ventures into the forest to find the materials that newly arrived brother Aidan requires to complete his illuminated manuscript of the Gospels. However, with a Norse attack threatened and a fearsome god, Crom Crouch, to confound, Brendan requires the help of a fairy named Aisling. Combining Celtic design, retro-style animation, and the majesty of the Book of Kells, the visually ambitious feature boldly mixes Irish mythology and Christian lore, but while this is a handsome picture that laudably avoids patronising its audience, it's not always as child-friendly as it might be. That's what the Radio Times thought.
That bit in the middle, I think it's Aileen and Crum Crouch, is it? Something like that? I might be wrong as well.
Well, then we're both wrong. So yeah.
But that's what's nice about it, is that it is based on a true story. And the kind of raids, the Viking raids on this keep that they sort of live in, apparently they did occur. It's unsure whether the Book of Kells was actually there at the time when they were being invaded by the Vikings. So there may have been some creative license. You wouldn't necessarily get the importance and the significance of the book just from watching the film. That was one negative, I must admit. That you were the whole time sitting there thinking, why is this book so important? What's going on? They didn't portray the significance of the book hugely. But then when you read about it on Wikipedia and the like, it's not overly clear what the importance of the book is. It's not overly clear why they found that so important.
Okay, well, that's Pete's view. Graham, how did you find The Secret of Kells?
I agree with Pete that it's a beautiful looking film. The style of it is certainly novel, and I thought that was great. With regards to the rest of it, I did find it a little bit dull. I didn't really follow the story. I didn't get the importance of the book. That seemed quite key, the book, but it wasn't really made clear, as Pete's already said, why it was important. Nothing really of great interest happens in it. It was fairly plotless, I thought. The ending, I thought, was particularly disappointing. It just seems to end and that's it. To be honest, it's really not my type of film. I probably would never watch it again because I just think it just really lacked substance to it. I just thought it was a bit empty, despite it looking great. Whether it was suitable for children, I was going to watch it with my children in the end, but I decided not to. I'm glad I didn't, because I'm pretty sure they would have been bored after 10 minutes. I don't think there was anything particularly unsuitable in it, but I just think they would have found it very boring. And to be honest, so did I.
Okay, Matthew?
Yeah. I thought it was an interesting mix of 2D animation styles. It is very visually interesting, almost too much I think, because virtually every shot it just went from some kind of 2D animation close up or far away or kind of comic book style or very stunning colourful visuals to then something quite bland. It was certainly interesting, but that's about as far as it went. The interesting was the visuals. The story was boring. As far as I could make out, the story was a boy must find ink to write a book with, or something along those lines. Difficult to take some of the accents seriously as well. I know they were meant to be Irish accents, but some of them seemed like comedy Irish accents. There were a few occasionally funny moments, although I can't really think of any at the moment. I think there's a bit where he's trying to climb a tree and something falls on his head or something along those lines. I just didn't really get what was going on at all.
Okay, well, I'm going to go next. I'm a fan of real animation as opposed to the CGI stuff, but I found the animation style quite ugly, to be honest, and I'm not sure why people love it so much. To me, it's like cutscenes from a video game, and the actual plot of the film was like a video game. So it was like a boy's got to go and find some ink, so you go and find some ink and bring it to somebody, and then you've got another task to do. And it just felt like a video game with video game visuals, and I couldn't get into it at all. The biggest issue for me, which you've already just mentioned, it was the almost racist stereotyping of the voice acting. It was absolutely shocking. Not just the Irish accents, there were some others. There was a West Indian accent of some sort that was just absolutely awful.
Yeah, wasn't there a Chinese guy in it as well? I think there was.
It was just terrible. But the only person who didn't overact was Brendan Gleeson, but he sounded bored throughout the film. He just didn't sound like he was interested in being there. So I thought voice acting was terrible, really didn't like the art style, and no story to it. So Simon, we're not being particularly positive about this. With your Irish roots, can you improve things?
I actually quite enjoyed it because obviously with Irish ancestry I know a bit about it. And again, it's quite a mysterious story to be honest, but I like the style. I didn't mind the art style. I was quite liked the fact that they're building these walls to try and keep out the Vikings, which has failed in nearly every one place. And his uncle was obviously, that's his priority, and he didn't let him want him to write the book. Quite like the cat. I thought the cat was quite nice. It was quite a character that came in that I just thought added to it, and like a bit of the nice side of the film. The bit I liked is when the Vikings did turn up, I liked the way they were portrayed as those sort of faceless ogres with horns on their heads. I thought that was quite good. But I just like the way it sort of like takes you away from things of life. It just goes off and he just goes through the trees and he's just sort of floating with her and they just disappear into the forest. It's a nice contrast with the horrible part of it where the town gets ransacked and everyone's getting attacked and they have to hide in the tower. But I actually quite like the film. From an art perspective, it was good and I just enjoyed it.
Okay, well, I will admit that as the film got towards the end, I quite enjoyed the end and not just seeing the credits roll. I enjoyed that it got a lighter tone, that the music was jolly, and it turned into an Enya music video or something like that. I actually did feel myself getting happier as it ended. And I didn't mean that in a negative way. You know, I actually did enjoy the end. I just didn't enjoy what took me to the end. Let's just go around and let's get our ratings from everyone. So, Pete, this was your film choice. What's your rating?
4 stars.
Graham?
2.
Matthew?
2.5.
Simon?
4.
And it's 2.5 from me as well.
Apart from Simon, you're all miserable sods.
Okay, well, it's actually my choice for the film for the next show. So let's hope that after Star Crash and Secret of Kells, there's actually a good film for us to watch. For this show's film club, I've chosen a small indie film. It's directed and co-written by John Watts, and Watts is quite an interesting character, and he's just been given his first blockbuster film, so he's going to be directing the reboot of Spider-Man for a 2017 release. But before taking his leap into feature films, he did loads of commercials, short films, things like that, but he also worked for The Onion, the American satirical news network. And while he was working for them, he did a YouTube video for a spoof horror film called The Clown, I think it was called. And it's about a man who puts on a clown suit and then can't take it off and starts getting possessed by the demon that's within this clown suit. And in this spoof trailer, they'd actually put on it from the master of horror, Eli Roth. And Eli Roth found out about it. He'd never heard of these people, got in touch with them, and then they ended up making a feature film with Eli Roth as producer and lead actor. I like a bit of backstory. I like that he's an interesting guy, this director. So Clown's not the film that I've picked, but it's one that you should check out. The film that I have picked is Cop Car, and it's basically a cat and mouse chase between a backward town sheriff and 2 young boys who've stolen his cop car. It stars Kevin Bacon, so I've got high hopes that you're all going to love this one. So that's our film for this show, Cop Car.
How far do you think we've gone? 50 miles. I think we're almost to the woods.
Down. What? The cop car. There's no one in there. No way.
Try this one.
Awesome.
What if someone sees us?
Well, let's tell them we're cops.
Good idea.
This is our cop car! This is our cop car! See how fast we can go.
Sheriff, we just got a report of 2 kids driving a cruiser.
Boys, I know you can hear me. You are in a whole lot of trouble. What we're looking at is a felony offense. Did you open up the trunk?
Are you a bad guy, Sheriff?
I know where to find you.
Are you okay?
You don't steal a cop car! What do you say we get you home safe?
Thank you, Gordon. We'll look forward to looking at that film in the near future. So now we're going to move to the main part of our show, which is the review of 2015. Obviously, we're focusing mainly on cinema, but we're also going to take a look or have a bit of discussion maybe about TV and music and games and things like that. 2015 was the most successful year in box office history, with worldwide box office takings estimated at over $38 billion and 5 films in a calendar year grossing over $1 billion for the first time in history. 2015 was the year of the franchise reignition, with Mad Max, The Terminator, Jurassic Park, Rocky and also Star Wars, of course, getting new installments. There are also new films from ongoing series such as Mission Impossible, Insidious and Fast and Furious. The Marvel Cinematic Universe continued to grow with the release of Avengers Age of Ultron and Ant-Man, bringing the franchise's overall box office takings to over $9 billion, which is another new record. Biopics continue to be popular too, with highlights being Steve Jobs, Straight Outta Compton and The Walk, and there were plenty of original films that met with critical acclaim as well, such as Brooklyn, Sicario, Southpaw, The Martian and Ex Machina. Animated films were once again successful, with Minions becoming the second highest grossing animated film of all time. More significantly, animated films such as Inside Out and Big Hero 6, which was released in the UK in 2015, using kid-friendly films to address the more grown-up themes of depression and grief. Of course, there were plenty of terrible remakes, sequels and outright stinkers as well, with notable lowlights being Fantastic Four, Poltergeist, Paul Blart, Mall Cop and Jupiter Ascending. As always, major awards for the best films of 2014 were handed out early in the year. At the Golden Globes, Richard Linklater's Boyhood received the Best Film, Director and Supporting Actress awards, and it claimed the same 3 at the BAFTAs, with Grand Budapest Hotel also claiming 5 awards at that show. Alejandro Inarritu's Birdman was the big winner at the 87th Academy Awards, taking home 4 Oscars, while Worst Film of the Year, based on the 4 Golden Raspberry Awards received, was Kirk Cameron's Saving Christmas. Are you with me so far? So just to finish off, top 5 highest grossing films of the year, all earning over $1 billion worldwide, were Jurassic World, Star Wars The Force Awakens, which is obviously still earning money at the box office and expected to become number 1, Fast and Furious 7, Avengers Age of Ultron and Minions. Rotten Tomatoes' top 5 highest rated films of the year was Mad Max Fury Road, Inside Out, Selma, Star Wars The Force Awakens and Brooklyn. The IMDb top 5 for the year, films receiving at least 75,000 votes, voted for by the public, were Star Wars The Force Awakens, Inside Out, Mad Max Fury Road, The Martian and Sicario. That's your summary of 2015 in cinema.
Okay, so what we're going to do now then is we're going to talk about what our highs and lows are of 2015. So we're going to go around the team, and if you can tell us your top movies of 2015. Peter.
Okay, my favourite film of 2015 is Crimson Peak. It's a film by director Guillermo del Toro. I hope I've not completely destroyed his name. Quite well known director. He's done lots of similar films, things like Pan's Labyrinth. He's also done more standard types of films, but still with a visual flair that he's known for, films like Hellboy. And I just really enjoyed it. It got mixed reviews, I would say. It certainly isn't regarded as one of his best films. And the story was a bit flat, I have to admit. There wasn't much of a story, but I really enjoyed it. I really liked the kind of fantasy, horror, sort of half gothic type visual style that he has, and it was quite enjoyable. The film it's sort of a tragedy. It's about a guy played by Tom Hiddleston who is trying to raise money to build a machine in order to mine coal, I believe. It's one of those films a bit like The Sixth Sense, whereas if I say too much, then it's like spoiler alert. So I don't want to completely destroy it for people, but it's a kind of family horror, tragedy, ghost, odd type thing.
Okay, great stuff. Moving on then. Simon, what are your films of the year?
I've got 2 films that I would put in my films of the year, positive ones. One was Mad Max Fury Road, which is a great reboot of the Mad Max series. Really enjoyed it. Like the style, like the the action. It was a great all-out action film. Story's a little bit muted, but that made up for all the action made up for it. I still really enjoyed it. But one I also really liked is The Martian. Matt Damon, American astronaut in the future, gets left behind on Mars after in a storm. They don't realise they think he's dead, but then they find out that by them satellite pictures, images that he's alive, and it's the whole story revolves about him trying to survive on Mars while they're trying to come up with a plan to rescue him. Visually excellent. The whole story, I thought everyone was good in it. I'm surprised to see Sean Bean in there, which was not what I expected in NASA, but there you go. And just a really enjoyable film. So the two ones that I've mostly seen recently.
He's going to starve to death long before we can help.
In your face, Neil Armstrong. I know how to save Mark Watney.
I'm not risking more lives.
This isn't a normal mission. If anything goes wrong, we die.
I'm not gonna die here.
The Martian, rated PG-13.
Great stuff. Okay, Graham.
My 3 films, first of all, is Ant-Man, which I already talked about earlier. Avengers, Age of Ultron. I'm a big fan of superhero movies, as you know. I didn't think this was anything amazing in terms of story. It's based on a comic book, so it's never going to be particularly in-depth, but it was pretty spectacular. It had some nice twists in it, and the characters were very good, and it was quite amusing in some places as well. There's quite a good interplay between the characters. And my other film is Kingsman, which is classified as 2014, but it came out here in January in 2015, early last year.
I'm offering you the opportunity to become a Kingsman. Like a spy of sorts.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
It's a bit much, innit?
Sorry about that. Needed to let off a little steam.
Son of a bitch! Kingsman, the Secret Service. Rated R.
I knew absolutely nothing about the film. I didn't even know it was based on a comic or a graphic novel when we went to see it. So I went in completely cold, had no idea whatsoever other than it was some sort of spy movie. And I must admit, I thought it was fantastic. It had a great villain in Samuel L. Jackson. Lots of twists and turns. I don't know if you guys have all seen it or not, so I won't tell you what the twists are. The plot was absolutely bonkers. Quite difficult to believe in at some points, but it was quite good as well. And also like the way it was based in the UK and kind of combined almost East Enderish scenes and that together with obviously the spy plot, and it was also very funny in places, quite gory. There was a lot of controversy about not only that, but some sexual references towards the end of it, which was a bit bizarre. But that was a very good film. So that's my top 3.
Thank you. Interestingly, 2 of your top films, one of them just missed out on my top 3, and one of them just missed out on my bottom. So, interesting.
It missed out on your bottom?
It did. It just missed the bottom.
All right, Gordon, there's no need to hammer it home.
That sounds dangerous.
Okay, Matthew, what about your favourite films?
Okay, well, 2 of mine have already been discussed. One at length, which is Star Wars, predictably, probably because I'm a big Star Wars fan. The Martian, I also thought was excellent, as Simon's mentioned. Great cinematography, and it's got a good mixture of thrills and drama. It is basically Castaway, the Tom Hanks film, but set in space, and it's utterly reliant on you getting on board with Matt Damon's character and liking his character, and he actually manages to. I'm not really a massive fan of Matt Damon, but in this film his character is almost instantly likable, and you really get behind that character and go, yeah, I want him to survive his time on Mars and get home. And there's lots of other stuff that goes on around it, which is at some points funny, some points dramatic. But yeah, it was just a really good film. Even better than I thought. It looked good from the trailer, but it was even better than I was expecting. And my other film in my top 3 was the Pixar film Inside Out.
Do you ever look at someone and wonder what is going on inside their head?
Signal the husband.
Uh-oh, what did she say? Oh, sorry, sir. No one was listening.
I'm joy. This is sadness. That's anger.
What?
This is disgust. And that's fear. Where are your emotions?
Brain freeze! The core memories! This is madness!
We have a major problem.
On June 19th, experience your mind
We could get lost in there.
from the inside out.
Think positive.
Okay, I'm positive you will get lost in there.
This place is huge. Imagination Land? It's Cloud Town.
There are at least 37 things to be scared of right now. I wish Joy was here.
There she is.
Hey, come back here.
From the creators of Up, The Incredibles, and Finding Nemo.
You can't focus on what's going wrong. There's always a way to turn things around. Here we come.
Disney Pixar's Inside Out.
It's not their best film, but I really like the concept. I'm sure most people know what the concept is. The characters are likeable both inside and out of the girl's mind that basically most of the film takes place in. What I was really impressed with, as I mentioned in my review of 2015, is that it deals well with the concepts that kids' films don't normally deal with, concepts of loneliness and depression. It's basically telling you what the mind of a depressed person works like to a certain extent, but it's still a good kids film. The kids see it on one level, the adults see it on another, or some adults do. It definitely does pull too much on the heartstrings at times, trying to make you all weepy when it doesn't really need to, but I think overall it was a good film and probably Pixar's third best.
I don't want to critique your best choices, but just one point I would like to make about Inside Out, because I actually watched it last night, and you're quite right, dealing with anxiety and growing pains and all of that is really good. But one thing that disappointed me is that they do all of that about when people don't feel included and all of that kind of stuff, but they still fall into the same trap of the happy girl is the beautiful skinny one, and the sadness girl is the fat frumpy one. So they're still reinforcing negative body image, and I found that quite disappointing with a movie that's got a message like Inside Out has. But other than that, I completely agree. Really good film, really interesting, and really funny.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's not a perfect film by any means, but I think that and Big Hero 6, which I also mentioned, which I actually think is a better film, but didn't class it as a 2015 film because it was originally released in 2014. They're dealing with themes that animated films have never really dealt with, and in a way that adults appreciate as well as kids.
Absolutely. Okay, well, that just leaves me to give my top three then. And firstly is It Follows. I talked about this in the last show, or maybe the show before, so I won't go into the details of that, other than it's teen horror done in a very different way to other teen horrors, and is probably the best horror film I've seen since the original Scream. The next choice would be Mad Max Fury Road. Absolutely stunning to look at. Not a lot of story, but non-stop action throughout.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
Absolutely loved it. Really, really enjoyed that film. And the final one would be Ex Machina, or Ex Machina, however you want to pronounce it. Really blown away by the visual style of this. It's such a stylish film, and the performances are brilliant. I've put a review on the website quite some time ago when I first watched the film, so check out the review on there. But it's an interesting take on the Google age, where everything we do, everything we know, everything we say is recorded and used for other purposes, usually advertising, but not necessarily. So if you haven't seen Ex Machina, you should watch it.
Can I respond now to you two's loving of Mad Max? So I agree with you guys about the visual side of Mad Max. I thought it was I watched it last night, actually. We've all obviously been catching up on 2015 movies. It looks amazing, fantastic, and I don't know if it's up for Oscars for visual design and cinematography and things like that, costume design, but it should be. But I just found it so boring. It's like an hour in, I'm like, are they still just driving this truck somewhere and then driving it back again? It's just like, I just couldn't get. I think my problem with films is if I don't get some kind of emotional engagement with the characters, I just get a bit bored, and there's no one to root for in that film. And also, it wasn't really about Mad Max, was it? It was about the woman, about Charlize Theron. Mad Max was just a side note to it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, is that it's not a Mad Max film, it's about Furiosa. But unlike you mentioned with The Martian, you don't immediately feel at one with Max, and you don't get that emotional attachment with them. But it's non-stop action all the way. I don't understand how you can say you were bored. I think you might be dead inside.
I just think action's good as a counterpoint to something else that's going on, but there wasn't that in that film.
Interesting. Brilliant. Okay, well, the last thing I'd like us to do is to decide on the MovieMuse 2015 Film of the Year. So we all gave a list of our favourite films of the year. So what I'd like you all to do is to give us your favourite of your favourite. So your individual film of the year. So Graham.
Kingsman.
Matthew.
Star Wars, The Force Awakens.
Simon.
The Martian.
And that then leaves me to pick Mad Max Fury Road. So we all picked different films. So what we're going to do now is we're going to vote for one of those films and not the one that you chose. So Graham, out of Star Wars, The Martian and Mad Max, which one are you going to go for?
Star Wars.
Matthew?
The Martian.
Simon?
Mad Max.
Go on, go for Kingsman.
I'm not going to go for Kingsman. I did see it and I did really enjoy it, but I am going to go for Star Wars, and that makes Star Wars officially the MovieMuse Film of the Year. So we've done our best films of 2015, so let's go through our worst films. I'm going to go to Simon first.
Only one I've got in that category is Spectre, very disappointing James Bond film, very generic, very on rails, not a lot of action. What action there was, I didn't think it was that great. Very implausible plot, stupid way he gets out of his defence with the fortress in a matter of seconds, killed about 3 guys and just jumps in a helicopter, flies away. It's just like a game at the start, like playing Uncharted on the PlayStation, and I just totally wasn't with it at all, and I'm afraid, extremely disappointing.
I really hate you right now.
Spectre.
Okay, Matthew.
I can think of a few no, there's only one that was terrible. There's one that I was disappointed in, which was The Good Dinosaur. I'm a big Pixar fan, as I'm sure you've gathered, and this one looked great from the trailer, and in fairness, the visual side of it is really, really nice, but I was really disappointed with the story. It's not Pixar standard story, there's nothing for adults in it really, it's a kids' film, which meant it was a bit disappointing for me. But on the subject of animated films, the worst film I've seen this year, and in living memory, in fact, excluding The Legend of Kells or whatever it's called, is Home, which was a DreamWorks film that was released this year. It's about some fairly friendly aliens that come and overtake the planet, not because they're evil, but because they're running away from a seemingly evil alien race.
The Journey Home.
But it's one of the most irritating films I've ever seen. It's got as the voice of the sort of lead alien Jim Parsons from The Big Bang Theory, and he's got such an annoying voice, and the aliens talk in this weird, almost Yoda-esque voice, but not like Yoda, just annoying. It's got this terrible kid-friendly R&B pop music all the way through it. It's a film I don't even know what it's made for. It's made for 12-year-old girls, I assume. The aliens all change colour with their emotions, so it's constant attention span sapping, changing from purple to green to yellow to orange and purple and back to green, and it was just dire. I was expecting it would be enjoyable, and it was just bloody awful.
Sounds great. Okay, so Graham.
My choice might seem a bit harsh, but it's basically because I've not really seen a lot of movies this year, but I wasn't particularly enamoured with Inside Out. Actually, for the reasons that Matt said he liked it. I think it skirts around a lot of adult themes dealing with depression and loneliness. But of course, as it's a kids' animated film, it can't really examine them too in depth. Certainly not to a level that you'd expect in a movie made for adults. So I found that a bit disappointing and far too manipulative all the time throughout, trying to get you to cry or whatever at particular moments. And I think as a musing on childhood or adolescence, it was quite disappointing, really. Having said that, my kids loved it, although obviously a lot of the deeper moments were completely lost in them.
Controversial. Okay.
Sorry, I didn't hate it. I thought it was still a pretty decent movie. It's just obviously I've not seen a lot of movies. So.
Okay, well I've got 3 films that made the list. Avengers: Age of Ultron almost made the list. But I won't go into that. If you want to read my review of that, that's on the website as well. But the 3 films that I've got are firstly United Passions, the FIFA biopic.
The Fédération Internationale de Football Association. FIFA. FIFA!
which basically tells the story of how FIFA started, how the British almost ruined it, and how Sepp Blatter saved the world. It's got a really good cast, and it's possibly one of the worst films in history. It's really, really bad. There are bits in it where it is, I may be being an oversensitive Englishman, but they basically tell the world that the English are pig dogs. We are the scum of the earth, according to this film. And it just glosses over anything the British have done well in football, not the football team, in football administration, and just glosses over it all to tell you the story of how an accountant from Germany became the most important man in football. Is he from Germany, or is he Austrian, or a Swiss, or whatever?
Swiss, I think.
Yeah. Swiss.
He's definitely an accountant. And you can tell because his life's just about money. But yeah, that was dreadful. Second and almost making the worst film of the year was Spy. Lots of people have been saying how fantastic this is, but I'm sorry, films with Melissa McCarthy making jokes about how fat she is just don't make me laugh. I find every film with her in it, particularly every film that Paul Feig does with her in it, are absolutely dreadful. So I am dreading the new Ghostbusters film. I really am. Spy was deplorable. But even worse than that was Jupiter Rising. It just makes no sense. It looks terrible, and it's just, there's no sense to it. And these are good movie makers making a terrible film. Good actors playing terrible parts. What you should do is just watch some of the YouTube videos where people have done Jupiter Rising in 2 minutes or something like that, and they've explained the film to you. Because even when someone explains it to you, it makes no sense.
Is it Jupiter Rising or Jupiter Ascending?
I think it is Jupiter Ascending.
We don't care anyway, it was crap.
Yeah. Just very quickly, and any good older films that you've seen for the first time this year, Graham?
I saw X-Men First Class, which I thought was a very good reboot of the X-Men series. It's probably my favourite of those current franchises at the moment.
I agree.
So I saw that for the first time last year. Michael Fassbender, I think, is a fantastic actor, and every scene he was in was completely electric. Not to make a bad joke.
I think you're quite right, and I think the new is it X-Men Apocalypse or something like that? The trailers for that look great, so I really like that reboot. For a change, a reboot's actually working, but I suppose it's not a reboot; it's prequel films, maybe.
I guess so. Yeah.
I actually thought the trailer for that looked terrible,
really?
The new one, but that's just my opinion, which you know didn't do anything for me. But there you go.
Okay, well, while you're on the mic, tell us yours.
Well, I watched so many films that I forget what year I watched them in. So that one I definitely haven't seen in full before, and I watched last year, was The Thing from Another World, which is the 50s interpretation of John Campbell, I think his name is. It's Who Goes There, which was ultimately made as The Thing by John Carpenter in the 80s. And it's actually John Carpenter's version is closer to the book than the 50s version was. The 50s version has the invader from space as basically some kind of vegetable. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's basically some kind of, they cut his arm off and it grows back, and they decide that it's basically a vegetable that's evolved into a higher form. Yeah, it's terrible. It's a terrible 50s B movie. But it did inspire John Carpenter to make The Thing in 1982, which was awesome, so fair enough.
Okay, great stuff. Simon, any older movies you've seen?
I mentioned it earlier that I'd seen it, Casino Royale. I know it's been out since 2007, but last year it was Christmas Eve, funnily enough, this first time I've seen it. I've now seen 3 of the 4 new Craig films, so yeah, that's the one that I hadn't seen, that's the oldest, and yeah, I thought it was pretty good.
Okay, so I assume that Quantum of Solace is the one you haven't seen then?
Yeah, that's the one I haven't seen.
Keep it like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, there are 3 films to call out, which were all awesome. Wes Anderson's The Darjeeling Limited, which was brilliant. I'm not a fan of his films, although the Grand Budapest Hotel was really good as well. But I've watched quite a few of his other films, and they've all just left me cold. But The Darjeeling Limited has just got beautiful scenery as these 3 brothers travel across India. It's got Wes Anderson's trademark humour, odd visual style, the same cast he always uses in every film, except I don't think Bill Murray's in this one for a change. But brilliant film, really enjoyed that. There's Still Life, Eddie Marsan as he's a council worker who finds people who've died and have nobody, they've got no relatives or anything. So he goes to their funerals. He arranges a funeral and goes to them to make sure that when they pass over, they're not left on their own, which is, it's quite a nice thought that somebody's there for everybody. And that is an absolutely brilliant film, very slow, very thoughtful, but absolutely beautiful film. But the probably the best one was a 1959 French black and white film called Pickpocket, which is brilliant, and it's just about a young man who starts to become a pickpocket, and it's about his life and his love. And early French, not really that early, but early French cinema isn't really something that I'm fond of or well up on, but that film was really good.
So, as with any year in cinema, many people in the cinema world pass away, and there's been some big names gone to the other side in 2015. We're going to pick a few of those now that mean something in particular to us. So let's start with Gordon.
Okay, well, I made a list, and there was well over a dozen of people. So I could list like Christopher Lee, Leonard Nimoy, Omar Sharif, Patrick Macnee, Al from Happy Days, Ellie Mae from the Beverly Hillbillies, Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre, George Barris, who created the Batmobile, Andrew Leslie, the Lord of the Rings cinematographer. I could have had any of them, but the ones that I've picked are Robert Loggia. That's how I say it, but I believe that in Italian it's Loggia. So Robert Loggia, who was the store owner in Big. He was in Scarface, Independence Day, The Sopranos, Jagged Edge, Officer and a Gentleman. He was in tons of films, really good actor. So Robert Loggia. Geraldine McEwen, best known for Agatha Christie's Marple on TV, but I'll always remember her as Cassandra from Red Dwarf. And finally, Roger Rees, who was more known for his stage work, but also played the Sheriff of Rottingham in Robin Hood Men in Tights. But more importantly and more personally to me, he was in the cruelly underrated Stop or My Mum Will Shoot with Sylvester Stallone and Estelle Getty.
Okay, Graham, your thoughts on those departed?
I've got James Horner. I talked about him a lot in the first episode, I think. One of my favourite film score composers. Probably my favourites of his are The Wrath of Khan, Aliens, which of course we spoke about, and A Beautiful Mind soundtracks. There's I think we mentioned his daughter earlier in this episode, Juliette Lewis. Her father was a guy called Geoffrey Lewis. I had a look on IMDb today, and actually he acted in 6 decades. Incredible career. He did mostly TV in his latter career. He was in a film called Way of the Gun, which is a really underrated film, I think, as a sort of like a henchman in that, and he was really good in that. But generally, he's one of those guys that cropped up and you kind of recognised him. But he was a good actor, and he was in a lot of films. He was famous in the 70s for being in Clint Eastwood films. He was in High Plains Drifter and the films with the monkey in, I can't remember what they were called, Any Which Way But Loose, films like that. Yeah, he was in those. So he was a good character actor. And my other one, and I only picked this guy because I watched a film, Die Hard 2, just before Christmas, and the guy that is in charge of the air traffic control, the name of the character I think is called Mr. Trudeau or something like that, Mr. Trudeau, played by an actor called Fred Dalton Thompson, who a bit like Robert Loggia, who Gordon mentioned, is kind of one of these character actors who pops up all over the place. But most interestingly, when I was researching this, I found out that he was in the Oliver Stone film Nixon, but he's not actually in it as an actor. Before he acted, he was a lawyer, and he was present in some archival footage that was used in Nixon. So he's actually in this film, but he's not acting. He's actually in his previous career as a lawyer. And after he finished acting as well, he was also a governor, and he was also a senator as well. So he's got quite an interesting career. I recommend anyone have a look at his career and his IMDb page, because it is quite interesting.
What an interesting fact. Okay, Simon, what are your thoughts?
There's only 4 people that stand out for me. The first one is Rod Taylor. He was especially for the film adaptation of The Time Machine, 1960, based on the H.G. Wells book. Patrick Macnee, obviously for the Avengers, he was in A View to a Kill, and obviously Oasis, Don't Go Back in Anger video as the taxi driver. But I always thought he was very good in what he did. James Best, obviously for the Dukes of Hazzard. Roscoe P. Coltrane, that's about the only thing he's really known for. He's probably in a few 70s films. He pops up in one now and again, but I can't remember off my head. And the other one is Al Molinaro for being Al in Happy Days. Yeah, that's always going to be... So I've been watching that recently. Yeah, that was sad to see him not around anymore.
Okay, thank you. And my choices, firstly, Wes Craven, the director who died this year of brain cancer, which sounds horrendous, age 76. Director, producer and writer of some of the greatest horror films of the 80s and 90s, most well known for creating one of the scariest and best horror films of all time in Nightmare on Elm Street, including of course Freddy Krueger. And he also revolutionised the slasher horror genre a decade later with Scream, which I think did for horror what Tarantino did for crime thrillers. You know, it really made it new and current and sort of self-referential and so forth. And he was also responsible for films like Last House on the Left, The Hills Have Eyes, Swamp Thing, Shocker and countless others as a producer and a writer. The second guy I've chosen is someone Gordon mentioned, Andrew Lesnie, Australian cinematographer who died at the very early age of 59 last year. Worked frequently with Peter Jackson. He was the cinematographer and director of photography on Lord of the Rings, all of those films, and the Hobbit trilogy, and King Kong and the Lovely Bones. So basically as responsible for the look of those films as Peter Jackson was, and they're amongst my favourite films, Lord of the Rings, I should say. And he's also director of photography on the Babe films with George Miller, who was the director of Mad Max. What a juxtaposition that is, Mad Max and Babe. And he also worked on I Am Legend. And my final pick, Rowdy Roddy Piper, former pro wrestler and actor in a large number of low-budget action, sci-fi and horror films, who died this year again at the early age of 61. His films, not very notable really, films such as Body Slam, Hell Comes to Frogtown, and Pro Wrestlers vs Zombies, which I really do want to check out. But his finest role, and probably what he's most known for, is John Carpenter's They Live, where he coined the famous line, "I've come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, but I'm all out of bubblegum." And he also used his wrestling background in that film to make the fight scenes more convincing, and has an epic brawl with co-star Keith David. And also a notable wrestling moment for him was a boxing match with Mr. T at WrestleMania 2, which he lost by disqualification. So they're all gone but not forgotten. Next up we have the classic scene, where one of our crew chooses, as the name suggests, a classic scene that means something to them and is memorable. So this time around it's Simon to choose. What have you chosen?
I chose the ending shootout in The Fistful of Dollars. It's where Clint Eastwood plays a character, Joe the Stranger, as his usual sort of drifter that is in the Wild West who comes to help a town out from the bandits. The reason I like this is just you see Clint Eastwood, he's outnumbered, he is playing his usual High Plains drifter type character in the Wild West. You know he's going to save the town, you're anticipating it, but you think the odds are stacked against him. If you don't know the film and you think they're going to kill him, this time he doesn't win, and he has a plan that comes up and he comes out on top, and I just love that.
And it was also homaged or parodied in Back to the Future 3.
Indeed.
Okay,
excellent.
Well, let's watch it.
Heard you wanted to see me.
The Americana's dead.
Let the old man down. What's wrong, Ramon? You losing your touch? You afraid, Ramon? Shoot to kill, you better hit the heart. Your own words, Ramon. The heart, Ramon. Don't forget the heart. Aim for the heart or you'll never stop me.
man with a 45 meets a man with a rifle, you said the man with the pistol's a dead man. Let's see if that's true. Go ahead, load up and shoot.
Okay, we're reaching the end of the show now. So what we like to end with is a bit of music. So we'll get Matthew this time to tell us his choice for soundtrack of the show, and we'll play out one of the tracks. So Matt, what have you got for us?
Well, I've chosen a score for a film which is this year is 40 years old, which makes me feel incredibly old. Coincidentally, I'm 40 years old this year as well. It's a film by a director that I've mentioned a few times already during the course of the show, coincidentally, and it was pure coincidence. Made for a budget of $100,000. The film is Assault on Precinct 13. Director is John Carpenter, and he also composes the music for most of his films. The score is actually, I bought the CD for it. The score is actually quite basic. It's only 25 minutes long, and it's basically a lot of the tracks are just like noises, like high-pitched sort of industrial sounding noises and things like that. It's a bit sort of avant-garde in that way. But there's three main themes that are used throughout the film and the score as well. There's the main theme. There's a theme called The Windows, which is quite intense. That's where the baddies break the windows of Precinct 13 to get in there, and there's also a more somber sort of theme done on the organ, I think, called Julie's theme. They're all great themes, but the one I'm choosing for the main sort of ending of the show is the main theme, and the reason for that is it's incredibly influential. It was sampled by a lot of 80s dance bands, most notably Bomb the Bass with their song Mega Blast, which you might recall was on the Amiga games Xenon 2. And also I read somewhere that Ice-T cites it as influential to early hip-hop, and I didn't really get the connection until I listened to it again, and it's got this kind of drum beat on a lot of the tracks that just goes like, and then I listened to some early hip-hop, which I don't do very often, but yeah, I can see that influence in that music. So yeah, Assault on Precinct 13, great film, the original I should say, not the remake. 40 years old this year, just like me, and still got something, unlike me. So that brings this episode to a close, almost. All we need to do is hand over to Graham to tell us what's coming up on the next MovieMuse episode.
Thank you, Matt. Yes, next month, join us in our secret underground lair as the MovieMuse crew dons their brightly coloured capes and wears their pants outside their trousers for a show all about superhero movies. We'll be talking about and debating all the best and worst examples of the genre, from Batman to Howard the Duck. That's next month on the MovieMuse podcast.